Celtic Guardian has one of the strangest reputations in Yu-Gi-Oh! He is instantly recognizable, closely associated with Yugi, included in nostalgic products, and remembered with the affection usually reserved for a signature monster. He also spends a surprising amount of the original series getting destroyed. Dark Magician arrives like the hero of an old legend. Summon Skull feels dangerous. Gaia the Fierce Knight enters at full speed. Celtic Guardian walks onto the field carrying one sword, 1,400 attack points, and the quiet confidence of someone who has apparently never looked at the opponent's side of the board. That modesty became his identity. Celtic Guardian was never Yugi's strongest monster. He rarely delivered the final attack. He received no ancient prophecy, no emotional conversation, and no special Bond scene explaining why Yugi trusted him. Yugi simply kept using him. Through that repetition, the elf with the green armor became one of the clearest representatives of Yugi's original deck and of an early version of Yu-Gi-Oh! That eventually disappeared. Before we get into his story, subscribe if you enjoy these deeper looks at the cards and characters that helped build Duel Monsters. Celtic Guardian is easy to overlook, and his career says far more about the series than his attack points suggest. His Japanese name is Elf Swordsman. The English localization calls him Celtic Guardian, which gives him a slightly grander identity and places greater emphasis on protection. His printed description calls him an elf who learned to wield a sword and says he confuses enemies with lightning-fast attacks. The artwork carries most of the personality. He is lean, alert, and lightly armored. He looks like a wandering fantasy warrior who survives through skill rather than raw power. That design fit Kazuki Takahashi's early version of Duel Monsters. Yugi's deck drew from several kinds of fantasy at once. Dark Magician brought sorcery. Summon Skull brought demonic horror. Gaia brought the medieval knight. Curse of Dragon brought the monster from an old role-playing manual. Celtic Guardian completed the party as the agile swordsman. The deck felt less like a modern competitive strategy and more like a group of adventurers assembled by a boy who loved games. The manga makes that origin especially clear. Celtic Guardian appears during the early Kaiba material and becomes part of Yugi's regular lineup before Duelist Kingdom. The manga version is shown as a level 6 monster with 1,400 attack and 1,200 defense, a reminder that Takahashi was still inventing and changing the rules. The physical card would later become a level 4 Earth Warrior with the same attack and defense. Those numbers sound poor now, and they became poor fairly quickly even during the original card game's early years. The television story first used them inside a very different system. Duelist Kingdom had no normal tribute requirement for high-level monsters. Field bonuses could transform an ordinary monster, and duels often depended on imagined relationships between creatures, terrain, and attacks. A monster's usefulness came from what it seemed capable of doing inside the scene. Celtic Guardian made sense there. He could move, climb, cut, and investigate. His human shape allowed the animators to place him inside a battlefield as an active participant. A dragon usually breathed fire. A swordsman could be directed toward a wall, sent through a labyrinth, or asked to strike one precise part of a machine. Duelist Kingdom rewarded visual logic, and Celtic Guardian had the body of a character who could carry out Yugi's instructions. His early defeats established another part of the job. During Yugi's timed videotape duel with Pegasus, Yugi summons Celtic Guardian after Pegasus has taken control of Dark Magician. Pegasus orders Yugi's own ace to destroy him. The sequence gives Celtic Guardian a brutal assignment. He becomes the friendly soldier killed by the hero's corrupted champion. The duel is designed to introduce Pegasus as an opponent who violates Yugi's basic faith in his cards. Kaiba overwhelms monsters through superior power. Pegasus reads Yugi's mind, steals control, and turns familiar cards against their owner. Celtic Guardian is ideal for that demonstration because viewers already understand his place. He belongs beside Dark Magician. Watching Dark Magician attack him makes Pegasus's control feel invasive before the larger plot explains the Millennium Eye. This became a recurring pattern. Celtic Guardian often served as the unit whose destruction proved that a new threat was serious. There is an unglamorous value in that position. Blue Eyes White Dragon becomes terrifying because recognizable monsters stand in front of it and fail. Toon monsters appear untouchable because a fighter we trust cannot harm them. A strange field effect becomes understandable once Celtic Guardian physically collides with it. The duel against Panic gives him a more active role. Panic hides his monsters behind darkness and intimidation, turning the arena into a psychological trap. Yugi summons Celtic Guardian defensively while he studies the situation. Later, Celtic Guardian attacks into the darkness and strikes the flotation ring on Castle of Dark Illusions. The attack appears useless to Panic. It has damaged the mechanism holding the castle in the air, preparing the collapse that helps destroy Panic's own monsters. Celtic Guardian does not receive the final image of victory. Gaia the Dragon Champion and Catapult Turtle perform the famous finishing combination. Celtic Guardian helps uncover the physical weakness that makes the plan possible. His purpose here is practical. He enters the darkness, finds something Yugi can use, and leaves the glory to larger monsters. That sequence captures the best version of the card. Yugi never needed every monster to dominate the opponent. Some monsters revealed information. Some created a path. Some forced an enemy to spend a resource. Celtic Guardian was the trusted blade sent forward while the rest of the strategy formed behind him. The Labyrinth duel against the Paradox Brothers expands the same idea. The battlefield is a literal maze, and monsters move through it as pieces on a board. Celtic Guardian feels completely at home in that environment. When Wall Shadow emerges to attack him, Joey saves him with kunai with chain. The exchange matters because the tag duel depends on Yugi and Joey protecting each other's monsters. Celtic Guardian becomes the object through which Joey demonstrates that partnership. This is a small detail, though Duel Monsters often built its friendships through small mechanical choices. Characters talk constantly about friendship, and their decks give those speeches a physical form. Joey protecting Yugi's swordsman carries more weight than another general promise to work together. Celtic Guardian survives because Yugi's partner is watching his side of the maze. He returns during Yugi's rematch with Kaiba at Pegasus's castle, where the scale has become absurd. Kaiba's fused 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons into Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Yugi's route back into the duel requires weakening that giant in stages. Celtic Guardian attacks one of the damaged Blue Eyes heads and destroys it, continuing a comeback that begins after Mammoth Graveyard infects the fusion. For once, Celtic Guardian gets to cut into the monster that defines overwhelming power. Circumstances have reduced the head's attack enough for him to do it, and that dependence is part of the charm. Celtic Guardian never pretends to be Blue Eyes' equal. Yugi creates the opening. The smaller warrior steps into it and completes his assignment. The scene reflects Yugi's entire approach during Duelist Kingdom. Kaiba values monsters that can crush whatever stands in front of them. Yugi builds situations in which a weaker card becomes sufficient. Celtic Guardian belongs to Yugi because his value depends on timing, preparation, and faith in the rest of the deck. His duel against Joey gives the card a different emotional use. Yugi opens with Celtic Guardian, and Joey answers with Flame Swordsman. Their monsters look like natural rivals, 2 human warriors, 2 blades, 2 extensions of the friends controlling them. Flame Swordsman wins the exchange, and Celtic Guardian is destroyed. The loss says something gentle about the duel. Yugi is not placing his untouchable ace in front of Joey and demanding that his friend overcome a legend immediately. He meets Joey with a familiar warrior and allows the match to begin on human scale. Joey's swordsman defeats Yugi's. Their friendship can survive competition, and Joey has earned enough skill to beat one of the monsters that helped carry Yugi across the island. Rebecca's duel uses Celtic Guardian in a similar early phase. He destroys Sangon before Rebecca removes him with Tribute to the Doomed. Again, the card performs useful work and leaves. He helps establish the flow of the duel without becoming its center. The final battle with Pegasus gives Celtic Guardian one of his most memorable humiliations. He attacks Toon Mermaid, and she survives because Pegasus's Toon creatures avoid normal destruction inside Toon World. Celtic Guardian is destroyed while the mermaid remains. He has attacked a cartoon and discovered that the cartoon does not respect the same reality he does. This moment reveals why Celtic Guardian was so valuable to the storytelling. He looks sincere. Nothing about his design is comic. He arrives prepared to fight a conventional fantasy battle, follows the normal language of sword against opponent, and gets erased by a mermaid who can bend the rules. Pegasus's deck feels offensive because it makes earnest monsters look foolish. Celtic Guardian supplies the earnestness. Dark Magician can survive embarrassment because the series will always restore his dignity. Celtic Guardian receives no such guarantee. Every attack carries the risk that he has been summoned mainly to show the audience how the opponent's new trick works. He became Yugi's professional test subject. That reputation sometimes turns him into a joke among fans. People remember how often he lost. The joke remains affectionate because his losses usually came from being asked to confront something far above his pay grade. He attacks Blue Eyes. He walks into Toon World. He faces monsters with stronger effects and higher numbers. Celtic Guardian's confidence never changes. His sword is always raised. The next disastrous assignment appears to surprise him every single time. Battle City changes his position. The rules become closer to the physical card game. Tribute summoning matters. Effect monsters matter more. Decks become faster and more specialized. Yugi gains cards tied directly to the Dark Magician, the Egyptian gods, and increasingly elaborate combinations. A normal monster with 1400 attack has little room left. The original Celtic Guardian largely fades from meaningful duel action. This decline reflects the development of Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. The early series could turn a sword strike into a strategic discovery. Later duels wanted written effects, exact costs, and chains of interactions. Celtic Guardian had flavor text and a blade. The game had grown beyond the kind of improvisation that made him useful. His disappearance also reveals how signature cards are chosen. Frequency alone cannot secure the position. Celtic Guardian appears regularly enough in the first season to feel essential, yet the story rarely reserves its largest emotional moments for him. Dark Magician defeats major enemies. Kurobo saves Yugi from situations that appear impossible. Gaia evolves through fusions and later becomes connected to Blackluster Soldier. Celtic Guardian usually handles the move before the move everyone remembers. That creates a ceiling on his fame. Audiences remember conclusions more easily than setup. A finishing attack becomes a clip, a poster, and a line repeated across future episodes. Celtic Guardian's contribution often lives several turns earlier. He damages one head, tests one effect, or places one ordinary body on the field. Remove enough of those small actions, and Yugi's miracle finishes stop making sense. Leave them in, and the final monster still receives the applause. The anime was kinder to Celtic Guardian's visibility than the manga, even when it was crueler to him inside individual battles. Manga storytelling has limited space. Once a card's function has been demonstrated, Takahashi can move toward new monsters and new mechanics. A weekly television adaptation needs more actions. Longer duels and recognizable images returning between major plot turns. Celtic Guardian becomes useful production language. The audience sees him and immediately understands that Yugi is using a familiar member of his deck. That is why his minor appearances matter collectively. One return cannot transform him into an ace. A dozen reminders can transform him into part of the furniture of Yugi's world. The card becomes associated with the sound of a duel disc activating, Yugi calling an attack, and an opponent revealing some completely unreasonable response. Familiarity slowly does what victories never could. There is also a meaningful difference between Yugi's relationship with Celtic Guardian and Atem's relationship with the legendary monsters. Dark Magician eventually connects to Mahad and the Pharaoh's buried life. The Egyptian gods belong to royal power and ancient destiny. Celtic Guardian carries no known memory from Egypt. He comes from the deck Yugi and his grandfather built in the present. That gives the card a quieter connection to Yugi Muto. Celtic Guardian belongs to the game before the full mythology takes control of it. He recalls the boy who enjoyed fantasy cards because they looked interesting and whose grandfather's shop was filled with old games. Even when Atem commands the monster, the card itself comes from Yugi's ordinary life. It keeps a piece of that ordinary life visible inside battles over souls, prophecies, and the end of the world. The anime found a clever way to preserve the idea through obnoxious Celtic Guardian, called Retrained Celtic Guardian in Japan. The English name is wonderfully strange. The monster has the same 1400 attack and 1200 defense, while its effect prevents it from being destroyed in battle by monsters with 1900 or more attack. That effect turns Celtic Guardian's history into a mechanic. The original card repeatedly stood in front of much larger enemies and died. The retrained version has learned how to survive them. He still struggles against monsters close enough to fight him normally, which adds a funny kind of logic. A giant cannot finish him. A moderately stronger employee from the same office may still ruin his day. Yugi uses obnoxious Celtic Guardian during the duel with Noah. Noah attacks the face-down monster with Shinado, king of a higher plane, only to find that the warrior survives because Shinado's attack is above the effect's threshold. The moment gives Celtic Guardian a late career correction. The old foot soldier finally faces a massive boss monster and remains standing. His survival also suits the duel's emotional situation. Yugi has inherited Kaiba's remaining cards and carries the responsibility of rescuing everyone before they are turned to stone. The field is filled with threats far beyond one ordinary swordsman. Celtic Guardian's upgraded form buys time against something enormous. The franchise acknowledges his familiar function and allows him to perform it better. The retrain also shows the limited way Yu-Gi-Oh! Preserved him. Dark Magician eventually received an entire strategy. Gaia developed a broad family of related cards. Blackluster Soldier became both a famous character card and a major competitive name. Celtic Guardian received occasional updates, including Celtic Guard of Noble Arms, which can summon another Celtic Guard from the hand and draw cards after dealing battle damage. That support recognizes him as a distinct identity. It has never developed into the same deep, coherent strategy enjoyed by Yugi's largest icons. Celtic Guard of Noble Arms arrived through the Dark Side of Dimensions era with impressive artwork and 2100 attack, yet its restrictions and tiny pool of related monsters kept the theme modest. Celtic Guardian gained a family consisting mostly of different versions of himself. There is something appropriate about that outcome. Turning him into a tournament-dominating archetype would create a pleasing comeback, though it could also erase the quality that made him memorable. Celtic Guardian was the ordinary figure inside an extraordinary deck. His limits were visible. Yugi's trust gave those limits meaning. The physical card tells the same story. Celtic Guardian entered the early international game as a super rare in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon and appeared in starter deck Yugi. The rarity and connection to the anime could make the card feel special to a young collector. The actual duel value was difficult to defend. Other level 4 monsters soon offered more attack or useful effects. A player who placed Celtic Guardian into a deck was usually choosing recognition and affection over efficiency. Even the earliest card pool placed him in an awkward position. His 1400 attack could defeat genuinely weak monsters, though normal attackers such as Battleox, Lejin the Mystical Genie of the Lamp, and eventually Gemini Elf passed him with room to spare. Celtic Guardian asked the player to spend a normal summon on a creature that offered no effect and rarely won a straight fight against the best common attackers. The super rare treatment created a strange gap between presentation and performance. Pulling Celtic Guardian from a booster pack felt like receiving an important card. Putting him into a serious deck quickly exposed the limitation. That experience may have strengthened his nostalgic reputation. He belongs to the childhood category of cards that looked valuable, felt valuable, and were carried around carefully even after older players explained that the numbers were unimpressive. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has many cards that became famous through competitive success, and many that became famous through story. Celtic Guardian belongs almost entirely to the second group. Nobody needs to invent a lost period when he dominated tournaments. His legacy survives the absence of that achievement. The anime supplied a biography the card game could never produce on its own. This also explains why improving him is difficult. A modern Celtic Guardian strategy has to respect the old image while giving the player enough advantage to survive current play. Raise his attack too far and the modest swordsman begins to feel like a different character. Add too many effects and the clean simplicity disappears. Leave him close to the original, and nostalgia becomes the only strong reason to summon him. Obnoxious Celtic Guardian solves that design problem better than it first appears. He retains the exact original statistics. His improvement is experience. He has apparently learned how to endure attacks from the giants that spent years knocking him off the field. The retrain respects the memory of failure and converts it into resilience. That choice helped preserve him. Children did not meet every card through tournament results. They met cards through television, starter decks, playground trades, and artwork. Celtic Guardian looked like one of Yugi's monsters because he was packaged as part of Yugi's world. Owning him gave a player one of the pieces seen on screen, even when the deck would have improved by replacing him. Nostalgia works especially well on cards like this. Blue Eyes announces its importance. Dark Magician is presented as an icon in nearly every form of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media. Remembering Celtic Guardian feels more personal. He belongs to the group of cards viewers notice by spending time with Yugi's full deck. Beaver Warrior, Feral Imp, Giant Soldier of Stone, Silver Fang, and Celtic Guardian created the texture surrounding the stars. A deck containing only signature monsters would feel like a collection of trophies. Yugi's early deck felt owned. It had glamorous cards, strange cards, weak cards, and cards he seemed to trust from one duel to the next. Celtic Guardian helped sell the idea that these 40 pieces of cardboard had a shared history before the audience arrived. The manga gives that shared history a more concentrated shape. Celtic Guardian appears throughout the Duelist Kingdom material and becomes far less important once the story moves into later systems. The anime extends his visibility with extra duels, brief appearances, and the retrained version. This difference matters because many fans experience Duel Monsters as a long weekly television series. Repetition created attachment. A monster could become iconic simply by walking onto the field often enough. The series never gives Celtic Guardian a spirit relationship comparable to Dark Magician Girl, Kurobo, or the monsters connected to ancient Egypt. His personality lives in his movement. He draws the sword, narrows his eyes, and charges. Viewers fill in the rest. The resulting fan image is almost more consistent than the actual card's record: loyal, brave, agile, and severely underpaid. He also represents a fantasy style that later Yu-Gi-Oh! Moved away from. Modern monsters can fill the artwork with machines, divine armor, cosmic energy, and detailed lore. Celtic Guardian is an elf with a sword in the woods. His silhouette is clean. His purpose can be understood immediately. He comes from a time when the franchise still carried traces of tabletop adventure, and when a duel could resemble two children describing what their fantasy creatures might do. That simplicity explains his endurance better than any hidden competitive potential. Celtic Guardian can be recognized from across a room. The green armor, long pale hair, pointed ears, and curved sword form a complete visual identity. He feels connected to fantasy without looking borrowed directly from one famous character. The design has aged more gracefully than the card text. So what was Celtic Guardian's purpose in Duel Monsters? He gave Yugi a reliable middle layer between disposable creatures and signature aces. He could enter early, perform one concrete task, and reveal the opponent's danger. His humanoid design made complicated battlefields easier to stage. His repeated losses protected the status of stronger monsters and effects. His occasional successes proved Yugi could make limited cards matter through planning. He also gave Yugi's deck humility. Kaiba built his identity around possession of the strongest monster. Pegasus built his around exclusive cards that mocked ordinary rules. Yugi carried famous power as well, though his victories often depended on weaker pieces accepting small jobs. Celtic Guardian was one of the clearest of those pieces. His career follows the history of the franchise. He begins in a loose game governed by imagination. He thrives as a useful fantasy adventurer. Written rules grow stricter, power rises, and he falls out of the deck. A retrained version returns, with an effect designed to survive the exact punishment that defined the original. Later support preserves his name without lifting him into the highest class of legacy archetypes. Celtic Guardian therefore succeeded in the one battle that mattered for his legacy. He remained recognizable after becoming obsolete. He survived without a famous finishing move, a starring episode, or a competitive championship attached to his name. He stayed in the memory of the audience through persistence. That makes him an unusually honest Yu-Gi-Oh! Favorite. Everybody saw the numbers. Everybody watched the losses. The affection comes from his persistence. Celtic Guardian kept appearing anyway, pulling the sword free and accepting whatever impossible monster Yugi had chosen for him to fight. Dark Magician was the soul of Yugi's deck. Kurobo was its heart. Celtic Guardian was the poor man who had to go first and check whether the hallway was safe. It usually was not.